Live. You're listening to Live with Men, the podcast.
This is Men, the podcast. We need to Michael Maruti. Nadia, what's up? Nadia,
sipping my
what's
coffee.
up? Yeah. I realize coming to Rita Michael Maruti is only fair. Bring out your...
My surname?
Yeah, government name. Nadia Ahmed, what's up? Nadia Ali Ahmed, what's up?
Say Michael and both. All three names.
All three names, my friend. How are you?
I'm good.
You good?
I'm good.
It's nice seeing you this Saturday. Hello, you on Snickers. You need me. I realize most of the time because, so for those who don't know, I mean, people know. For most of the time, we usually record at Nadia's office. So Nadia's office had this very strict no shoe policy. Like, you can pick up, you take off your shoes, you go record. And I remember what one but Michael, why don't tell us before? What if tukifika na socks zetu zimechanika au zimetoboka? I'm like, I expect at this age uwe at least kuna vitu kama mwanaume lazima uweze kujiangalia vitu kama socks.
It's also it's a free judgment zone.
It is a free judgment.
Space you can come and say, I strangled a cat at some point. I'm like,
let's deal with it. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So now we've moved space for the couple of last episode. So now I'm seeing Nadia on shoes. I'm like, Nadia's on sneakers. I don't remember the last time I saw you. I've never seen you.
Yeah, I'm always in my Shanga shoes.
Yeah, so this is quite interesting. Nadia is our own resident psychologist. You wanna reach out to her? It's at Mind Matters TZ on Instagram, at Mind Matters TZ on Twitter. I want to see on Facebook. I don't know if you're on Facebook.
There's a page.
There's a page.
But they're all linked now.
Yeah, they're all linked in. Yeah. So just go into the link on the bio ambayo itakupeleka moja kwa moja kwenye website yake, and then definitely unaweza kuwasiliana naye. Mimi naitwa Michael Baruti and this is Men the Podcast, at Men the Podcast on Twitter, at Men the Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Pale ukiingia kwenye bio kuna link ambayo will take you to either Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podvine, Good Pods, Boomplay, anywhere ambapo unaweza ukatufanya utusikilize podcast yetu, and then from there unaweza ukatupata vizuri sana, and we can actually sikilize a lot of all of our previous episodes ambapo tumeshare kuzifanya before. They can all be accessed over there, so tutafute tusikilize pale, and then give us a shout, send us a text, send us a DM, whatever ambacho unahisi kwamba tunapaswa kuzungumzia. So yeah, this is our episode number 71. I feel good every time I mention on which. By the way, I found it an amazing stats last week. I was having a meeting with this lady called Josephine. She works in a podcast universe. Okay. Right? And then she said something that really, really made me proud of what we've achieved. Do you know 90% of the podcasts zinazoanzishwa duniani, they don't get beyond the 10th episode.
We are at 70.
We are at 70, my friend. We are at 70. 90%. And I was like, so literally all the podcasts in the world unazozisikiliza ambazo they've survived for long, it's only 10% of the podcast ambazo zimeanzishwa. And this is a known stat. I was like, I'm amazing. Show the power of consistency.
Yeah.
Shows the power of consistency. So yeah,
community. All of y'all listening is what gets us to sit down
100%.
and all our guests that keep trickling in. Like
100%.
We've never run short of having someone who's ready to open up.
I know.
Share what their perspectives.
Yeah.
Their stories.
Yeah.
This is
just amazing. It really is amazing. So we appreciate you for, kutufanya tu accountable kwa kuendelea kurecord week in, week out. We appreciate you ambao mnasikiliza, mnachukua muda wenu, for those who give us feedback. I know we've had some shitty voices in the past, it's been part of the process. Listening to some of the episodes that I sit from them, you're like, hey, yo, how did we put that out? But it is what it is.
It's raw.
It is. Yeah.
It just shows how we develop, right?
Exactly.
Like we would record. Well, what did we do at some point through Zoom?
It's been...
Sometimes we're outside, there's cars passing.
It's been a journey. But what I promise is that we'll keep getting better, getting better, and, keep getting better and better and better. So this is it. Yashuke.
Yes,
It's Yashuke.
It's the Swahili version, so Yashuke.
So how many versions do we have of this name?
Well, it depends. Like earlier we were talking, and you know, you're obviously connected to the Japanese anime where they say Yasuke, but that's
that was my first
H.
thought, by the way.
Yeah.
That was my first thought. And then I saw you. So as you were coming, they on this random, you conversed with the guy for so long, and I'm like, this guy mevaa like a proper martial art, kung fu master teacher. Or whatever it is purely so. And that's when I connected easily. I was like, you know the whole Wu-Tang Clan story and Shaolin thing that they do.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
I'm like, there's that connection over there I saw, and I'm like, this name must be connected to the Yasuke that you know I've read about.
Martial arts, I definitely love martial arts, and I'm in the process of becoming a martial artist, at least in the physical sense.
Oh, wow.
But one thing I tell people is, ultimately, what you want first is a black belt within, and then you can get one on the outside, you know. But so there's a love for martial arts, a love for Asian culture. I like the discipline. I like the that comes with that. With the topics and different things we're going to talk about today, there's definitely a big part of learning about yourself, disciplining yourself, as it's the highest form, best way to grow, really. So Yashuke, that's Mayote Yashuke. So there's a play on both sides.
So which name do you want us to go with today? That or your government name?
No, Yashuke.
Yashuke it is, but you want to talk about your government name as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Rhodes. Rhodes is the name I grew up. Most people call me in.
Rhodes and Cecil Rhodes.
Yeah,
Rhodes,
well, there's the Cecil Rhodes.
Rhodes and Rhodesia Rhodes.
And Rhodesia, so Rhodes is English root, so there are two different paths to the name. So there's the English root, which means a path, a clearing, a pathway. And then you have the more Greek orientation of the Isle of Rhodes, if you're familiar with that, which is more like a field of roses. So
either way, it's like
Yashuke.
Yashuke. So that's what we're going to stick with. So we have Yashuke in the studio. There are a lot of things that we want to speak about. There are a lot of things that we were talking before we pressed record. We'll get to that. But the core part of our conversation today is relationships, male and female, an in-depth examination, roles, and the dynamic of sexual energy. This is something that we really, really want to discuss, and it has a very long. It's a very long title, but Nadia is the king and the queen of coming up with a podcast titles. Usually, I'm stuck. So nikimaliza, I listen to it back, and I'm like, I'm putting it together. I'm like, Nadia, I'm stuck. What should the title be? And she has a very weird way of saying, what options? Like, nah, Nadia, I don't have an option. I don't know if I find your purposely or what. I'm like, I don't have an option. Later on, I'm thinking about this, like, nah, it's not good enough. This, I'm not good enough. 2 minutes later, like, this should be the title. I'm like, but why did you make me go through all this process? Yakuya and all this and the name. Why can't you can easily send me one? Yeah? Why, Nadia? Why?
because it's your process that inspires me.
So we're going to get to that a little bit, but I want to know you a little bit. I know we are speaking off air, and I think you have a very interesting story. Before we get to the part about Nazungumzia hapa leo. So
you want me to share?
Yeah, I want you to share. But then,
what we were talking about?
Exactly. Okay. So the concept zima ya men, the podcast tunasema ni ku-unpack na ku-unlearn, you know? This is what we've been saying from episode 1. Na tuna-unpack, tuna-unlearn vitu ambavyo tumekuzwa, tukiaminishwa na kuambiwa kwamba hivi ndivyo mwanaume anavyopaswa kuwa. And you gotta admit, kuna vipo ambavyo vina work, you know, we gotta admit, vipo ambavyo vimetusaidia na ndio maana maybe tumefika hapa tulivyo, lakini kuna vipo ambavyo vimeturudisha nyuma pia, because maybe hatukuwa na understanding, hatukuwa na ufahamu, and then we never really got to question them, you know what I mean? Ni jamii ipo imetupeleka, ndivyo tunavyoenda. So that was the essence ya sisi kuwa na hii podcast, as let's unpack all the things, the ones that worked, vile ambavyo vikufanya kazi, na kuona na how do we meet at the middle, na kuona namna gani we can actually conversate na kujaribu kuimprove, you know, the whole scenario. So as you are giving your backstory, it really took me back to that essence of why we started the podcast.
Absolutely.
So can you take us a little bit like who's Yashuke? Just in a nutshell, tulichokuwa tunazungumzia off air.
Yeah, so I am, Tanzanian born. I have had the opportunity to travel the world a bit. Family, my father has worked in the diplomatic international space. But ultimately, I through that travel, through being around the world and meeting people of different walks and cultures and belief systems, you get to learn a lot, one, about yourself, but also about what it is that the world is missing. You know, most of the time, for most people, they're in a hot pot. You know, you're just limited to a certain space for a long period of time. And one thing I've learned is that perspective, if you can, whatever you do, whatever you choose to do, make sure you're gaining perspective, more and more perspective, because that's where the wealth is in perspective. It helps you understand the world better. It helps you learn about yourself more. So if you're not getting more and more perspective, then by a large part you're missing out on so much. And obviously with tools like the internet and social media and things like that, there's exposure, but it's not authentic in how it comes to you. You know, one thing I've learned as well is the things that you learn more from the things that you do not seek out.
You learn more from the things that you do not seek out.
Yeah.
So
we you know, nowadays if you have your phone, you have your channels maybe you subscribe to, if you have the algorithm pushing content down your screen, and most people live within the confines of their tastes or their idea of what it is that they love or they connect with. But growth, understanding, expansion, liberation in the truest sense comes when you move outside the norm, outside what you consume on the everyday. So I'm someone who, through the experience of just being around different people and seeking the highest version of myself, I got to really see and learn the value to that. So I enjoy going places where most people don't go. I enjoy doing things that most people will not do, and not in the sense of but I want to be different, or it's just who I am. You know, I want to see what's on the other side. So for example, we were talking earlier about the time I went to South Africa, and when I went down to South Africa, I was in this community of different people, travelers, and when it came to take a tour of Soweto, of going to Soweto, everybody's getting on the tour bus, right? But that tour bus, it takes you to the Mandela Museum. It does the tour guide stuff,
basics,
you
right?
know.
The tour guide stuff.
But if you really want to know Soweto, you gotta go into the slums. You know, you gotta go into the parties and the house music that's happening in the corners and meet the people in their day-to-day culture. And I chose to go, I sought that path out. Wow. And what I've learned in life is when you have to one, go to the root of things, find the root wherever it is you're engaging in, or whatever it is you're engaging in, is really try and connect to the root of those spaces. And once you connect to the root of those spaces, then you work your way up and you learn a lot more that way. So you're gonna have to help me. Sometimes I go on a tangent.
No, it's not. This is what this podcast is known for, by the way. Just
like
so you
it when
know.
people go off tangents.
This is what this podcast is known for. Sometimes people go like, "What did you guys start talking about? Like, where's all these things? Where are all these things coming from?"
So going back more to my journey. So I've been somebody who's looked to learn from different work experiences as well. So I've worked in the creative space. I've managed talent. I've managed artists. I had a platform. Well, I still have a platform. It's just not as active at the moment because I started doing something else. But for a period of time, about 3 years, I was managing emerging artists across Africa, a platform called Yashuke Africa. And then I've worked in rehabilitation space as a mentor and a teacher for people who struggle with addiction and addictive patterns. I've taught young children as well, more on a community basis. And I also do design work, so branding, clothing, and things like that,
Gotcha. You want to say something, or should I go on?
I liked when you spoke about mentoring people, who've been through addictive disorders.
That is what I wanted to ask you about. And
That's
apologies for getting a little bit personal here. Have you ever been addicted to? Have you ever tried to use? Let me put it.
Have you ever tried to? Yes, Michael, we've used things.
No. That was not. We've used things that we've used things that we can never ever be able to use. But my point is, what was the drive for that part? I'm just interested. Like, what was the drive?
So I live.
Think that's the right way to ask, right?
Michael. What motivated you to get into that space?
So I live in Kigamboni, and when I moved to Kigamboni about 2 years ago, at the time I was driving, and I moved into this house, and I don't know if for those that are listening, or if you don't know, Kigamboni has quite a few sober houses. And right next to the house that I lived in, there was a sober house right next to the house. But at the time, I was just driving, unafungua geti, you get out the house, you don't really engage with the neighborhood and the people around. So eventually, during that year, I was getting into so many car accidents, so just these odd car accidents. And eventually I decided to just put the car away. And now I was walking in the neighborhood and meeting people and seeing what's going on. And I decided, like, hey, maybe I should, walk into this sober house and share something about myself and my experience. Because growing up over the years, like I was telling you earlier, I've lived a rather nomadic life in many ways. And
you've been around the world. You've seen.
But a lot of people have traveled as well, and a lot of people have been to different places. But most people, when they go into this space, these vacuums, they move within certain boundaries. They still stay in the safe space, so to speak. And on that journey, on the life path, just like with everyone, the things that you pick up that you struggle with, different. So I had impulsive control issues, whether it was with money, like at a point I developed like a gambling habit, whether it was with my sexual energy and how I would share it. And over time, these patterns were getting more and more ingrained, and there wasn't a structure around me or like anyone I could talk to, anything I could, and that made me have to go within and figure out how I gotta learn something about how to get out of this state and just be better. And over time, this is something that's taken years of learning about myself, learning new information, teaching myself. And so ultimately, when I moved to Gamboni at that time, I was in this space where I wanted to be healthier physically, mentally, and I needed to make some changes. At the time when I was still driving in that car, it's like over 100 kilos. You didn't know that looking at me now. But I was over 100 kilos, and you're just sitting in the car, going to do whatever you're doing, and you get done, you're back in the car, eating what you want to eat. So I was at this crossroads where I really needed to make a change. And as I was working on myself, I, found myself like, hey, why don't you also go in here? Because there are people who are also trying to work through certain things, and because here's the thing about addiction, and this is what I tell people, is we all have addictive patterns. It's just a question of what. For somebody, kwa mwengine, akipokea mshahara mwisho wa mwezi, 80% of their salary is going to buying shoes and handbags. And every month, anatafuta hela ya luku by the third week, but she has, the latest designer shoes.
I got you.
Kwa mwengine they cannot tell the truth. Hata akimaliza aelewi mwenyewe kwa nini nilidanganya, So these are things that exist. So when it comes to something like, say, somebody who's struggling with heroin or alcohol or sex addiction, people don't even think sex could be something someone could be addicted to, and really, but it's very, very prevalent, especially in our society at this time. Kama mai kupita hizi gesti, you see, there's a reason why those businesses are very
business is boom.
Yeah, it's na boom sana, so and it comes these mwingine chakula usimwacha ajipakulie, like the food addiction, like it comes in different forms.
On
so
social media, phones.
So I that's how I ended up saying, okay, let me go in here and just share my experience and how what I struggled with and the steps I've taken, and maybe that can help somebody else.
I like when you talked about addiction, because sababu I think for most of time addictions za wengine ambazo tunaziona zinafanya tuone za kwetu sio tatizo. You know what I mean? In the sense kwamba nikiona huyu ana struggle na pombe, nikiona huyu ana struggle na substance abuse, I'm like, well, ya kwangu ya kudanganya is not as bad as ya huyu mwingine, au ya kwangu ya kutumia hela ovyo au nini, because I don't know if kwa sababu ya nature ya society ambayo imejengea kwamba ile pale ni mbaya zaidi ya lakini realistically speaking ukiangalia, I think they're both equally challenging. I would say they're both equally challenging. Lakini somehow somewhere tumeona kwamba tukipinpoint zile pale mbaya, then we don't have to speak kuhusiana na za kwetu ambazo tunadili nazo.
No, actually Michael, nadhani muda mwingi when it comes to, we live in everything, especially when it comes to addictions, there are things at some point they are observable. Like we can see. Sindio. And as Yashuke said, addictions, we all have the trait. We have the ability to develop addictive tendencies. So some more than others. Lakini muda mwingi as a society, only when your addictive tendencies are now affecting me is when I see that this is a problem and you need help.
Wow.
Right? And that's why it's so hard to help people who are now addicted to these substances or things that are affecting their lives in a massive way. But if we had picked up, because unaona mtu tabia yake, but before she gets to bankrupting herself and having to take loans and stuff to start getting those shoes that she's looking for or cover her, her life and her daily needs, before she gets there, we can observe that, okay, every month this is what you're doing, right? Before it's them having to come to me and say, Nadia nikopesha sing flani sina pesa za kuweka umeme, before it gets to now infringing in my life now, in my pocket, I mean, that's the best time to address it. But wengi wetu, tunaona evidence, maisha yake mwenyewe atajijua, lakini one day because the addiction only grows, it's like tunaanza kupave barabara. Imagine you're walking through a forest, majani, but wote tunaanza kutumia njia moja, this pathway. At some point we beat that ground paka majani hayakui pale, tunatengeneza barabara. Right? That's what addiction is. It's like it's a grass, a field, and then we start to walk a certain path. Then the more we walk it, the clearer that path is, the more addictive it is. Because now I'm like, okay, this is easy. Sihitaji kuogopa nitakutana na nyoka, na kenge, na mdudu gani. Like, I can see exactly where I'm going. That's how people get addicted, because now it's like, it's a road. It's like, imagine this is the route you've been using, ya lami. Ya nini niende kupita kwenye mdongo poromoko huko wakati hapa barabara. You know? But that inaanza hivyo. And if as a society tungeanza because it's sio kwamba hatuoni, tunaona when someone has this tendency. Mwenzangu kila siku anakesha bar, au huyu ana pesa zake anazimaliza kila siku, lakini kwa sababu haini affect
tunachukulia
poa, their problem. Lakini it gets to a point, any and every form of addiction becomes a social a social burden and responsibility.
I think the more we speak about it, the more we help maybe to either paint that picture na kuwafanya watu waelewe. Maybe ndio inaweza kafikia point kwamba tukasema we as a community now, okay guys, how do we tunasaidia now? This is why we always talk about being a brother's keeper, or this is what it means, or we need to say it takes a village. This is what it means, kusema kwamba guys, tukubaliane from the get go. Tukianza kuona mambo yako hivi, hey, this is when you need interventions from the get go. Na yani kuna siku I think we did an episode with Madenge, which is that it's titled Let's Keep It Real, We Need Each Other. And he talked about tukaonanga concept ya wanaume na wanawake na vitu kama hivyo, lakini akasema kwamba in most parts kwenye addiction, especially kwa wanaume, exactly what you said, kwamba ikishafika mwisho ndio tunaona namna gani tunaweza tukamsaidia mtu, whether ameshaingia kwenye hali imekuwa mbaya zaidi na nini. Kwa nini tusijaribu kudevelop namna ya kuweza kusaidiana kabla, then itazuia matatizo mengi sana ya kule mbele. So I like what you do, my guy, and there's power in sharing, right? There's an amazing power in sharing,
and that's the thing as well. Once you've done the work, you're just speaking your truth. It's really, it's for me. I'm not. There's no shame about things I've been through and I've been able to conquer. So I'm just speaking my truth, and if somebody else can connect to that, then
and can gain from that.
So which brings me back now to the topic that we wanted to speak about, right?
We went off a tangent.
It's what we do. It's what we do. Come on, it's what we do. But which brings me back to the topic ambao nataka kuzungumza nayo. We want to talk about relationships, male and female. An in-depth examination role of dynamics of sexual energy. So, moja, what pushed you kusema, you know what, this is one thing that we should speak about more as men, as watu ambao tunajaribu ku-champion conversation kuhusiana na mental health kwa wanaume. What made you think kwamba this would be a very good discussion for us to have?
I'd say cha kwanza ni kwamba there is no relationship that is one more important than the relationship you have with yourself. You see, that's at the root of.
Speak on it. People need to understand that. Hakuna uhusiano muhimu kama uhusiano ulionao na nafsi yako na wewe mwenyewe na kila kitu chako mwenyewe.
Absolutely. 100%. Yani there is nothing more important, and for anyone who's listening, this is something I hope they can take away. Sijui tutafika wapi na maongezi, but right here where we are, there is nothing more important than the relationship you have with yourself, because ultimately, if one, you do not seek to protect, first to understand who you are, what you're not. And then second, to protect, to protect that part of yourself. Because the minute you have an understanding of who you are, to the root, napenda sana neno la mzizi.
Mzizi, the core.
Yeah. So inabidi ujue mzizi wako. Ujijue because everything around us is structured in such a way that by the time you're 10, you've already been pulled so far from your true self that wewe ukiwa mwanaume wa miaka 20, 35, they're married men with successful companies with a lot of money and outwardly happy families.
Outwardly.
Yeah.
Keyword, yeah.
Lakini akikaa chini yeye kama yeye in his silence with the honesty of your soul, there's a part of you that you're still so far away from, you know, and that is, and as long as you're far away from that part, it does not matter what's around you. Ultimately, the cycle will keep happening so that you can connect with that part of yourself. So the reason I want to talk about relationships is the idea of relationships between a man and a woman is a secondary thing. The primary thing is the relationship you have with yourself. Because once you're secure and you're rooted in that, then any relationship, whether it's in business, personal, friends, children, whatever it is, the energy, the power feeds off that foundation. And the struggle and the challenge is that for most of us is we lost that foundation. We're living with a shaky foundation, and it's a tough thing to be honest to yourself about. But ultimately, kwa mfano kama mimi hapa, I'm, you know, on my newly opened Instagram page. By the way, you guys are gonna be my first followers. At this point, I have 0 followers, 0 posts. But after that,
Nadia is on it like right now. What's the name of the page?
The page is Yashuke Masura. So
Yashuke is Y-A, the spelling.
Yeah, Yashuke. Literally, you're gonna see 3 zeros there.
Yashuke
Masura.
Yashuke Masura.
Yeah. So, please help me connect back to
So you're talking about the power of being having a relationship on your own, and why it's so important for you to connect with yourself, because
Absolutely.
If not, at some point,
So
thank God I was listening.
So the reason I brought up the Instagram is on my bio I put creator, teacher, student, and for me the student part is the most important part, because ultimately kama wanavyosema ni elimu haina mwisho, but ultimately learning about yourself, understanding yourself, this is what they call ascension in the truest sense. Elevation is non-stop. That evolution keeps going. And when it comes to so how do you grow? You cannot grow if the foundation has not been, you know, set in stone, as they say. Kwa hiyo kitu ambacho nachojaribu kufafanua in terms of the relationship one has with themselves. First, kwanza tukirudi uchangani, nasema uchangani, in our youth, in our that toddler stage. In the scriptures, you have the Isa or Yeshua, for those who are familiar with the Christ figure. Anasema ukitaka kuingia, if you want to get to the heavenly place, then you have to have the spirit of similar to that of a child, like a toddler actually is the exact quotation. Now, the reason for that as well is sasa kwa maana kwamba as a 40-year-old, as a 50-year-old, why is it that why is it a toddler? You know, so there's something about the root, there's something about the foundation, there's something about the purity of that space, of that age space. And the further we grow, we live in a society and an environment. It's not a purified space. You see, it's a space with impurities. So as you're growing, you're taking in different types of impurities. The question is, are you conscious of the impurities
that
you're taking in? And how they're coming at you, where they're coming from. Unaona. Was ili swala la wazazi, that's like a whole other chapter and probably talk show. But with parenting, you know, children, for the most part, you're at the mercy of your parents in those early years. You know, for those that are fortunate enough to have parents around. Now, there is having a parent around in the physical sense, but kuna wengine mzazi is there physically, but they're absent and detached on the emotional side and the engaging side, you know. So the relationship of the ambao unayo wewe kama wewe for a lot of people and a lot of listeners wanaosikiliza leo ni kwamba at some point, and this is speaking for the young African generation, the young international generation, is at some point there has to be a point of revision of who you are. If you do not get to a point of revision of the idea of yourself at any point in your life, especially in these early 20, 30, 40 years, then there's a high probability that there's a big part of yourself that you move through life without.
I want to bring in Nadia here as a mental health expert, right? Yashuke spoke about the importance of connecting, and if I try to dumb it down, it literally means kujijua na kujifahamu na kujua what works for you na nini na vitu kama hivyo. What happens when we don't do that?
We continue to be unconscious, right? So ni kama tunaendelea ku move through, and that's literally the foundation of the work that I do with clients, is get them to their root. You know, yes, we are the product of our society, our environment, our parents, their traumas. We're basically a product of traumas, people's traumas, and our own.
Wow, you're keeping it real. It is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, even ukiangalia the different issues that people have, those are just coping mechanisms with the traumas that they've had to deal with in their lives. But when someone does not take that time, because as Yashuke nicely put it, that it's not something that you just wake up and you rediscover who you were and who you truly are, not the programming that you received along the way. Kwa sababu those vital years from conception all through 6 years old, that's where all the coding is happening. And who does the coding? It's your parents, the people that your parents trust you to be around, the community, societies you live in, the experiences your parents are exposing you to. None of those things are your own free will, that I choose to go to this type of school, I choose to do this. Your parents even dictate who you're going to go on a play date with, or who are the friends you're going to engage with. So a lot of it is not self-directed. It's not you that puts yourself in those environments. So if one does not take that time, you continue to live an unconscious life. Now wengine, it works well for them because perhaps the programming the parents laid out works well for them. Like, it helps them to be adaptive people. They're living well-adjusted lives, both emotionally, physically, financially, socially. Lakini ukiangalia kiukweli, unakuta mtu anaweza, kama Yashuke amesema, socially, they've learned to wear a mask. Right? Financially, they've learned how to make the money. They've learned to buy what helps to, again, fit that mask, that social mask. Lakini the place where and I've seen in my practice where most people have not gotten the right foundation is when it comes to their emotional, their emotional selves. Now, your emotional self, achana na financially, socially, those things, they're also guided by your emotional well-being, right? That you might feel less distress if your foundation was more so, how do I get in tune with my emotions and manage them and contain them and process them in a healthy manner, than me being filthy rich. You find the person who is poor, living a very simple life, or, not necessarily, I wouldn't say poor, but just living a very simple life. Not your millionaire, not your massive business owner, but is well adjusted emotionally, is very much content with everything that's around them. Compared to the person who has all the material, all the external, but is lacking that internal peace.
This is why when rich people tell you that money is not everything, we don't tend to believe them. We are like, no, come on, what you talking about? But sometimes
there's still that saying, it's better to cry in a Merc than a bicycle or whatever, which has some truth, because again, all those external things, they help to facilitate some form of comfort. I mean, they have, now the people who can then afford it can then have access to a guide. I sometimes will call myself a guide, or someone to sit with you in the journey of your self-discovery. Compared to someone who's not been given the foundation where they're able to walk themselves through their internal journey, and have also not been given the external stuff. So now they're all-roundedly disadvantaged, and I think that's where the concept comes. Is like that person in a Mercedes, yani waamue tu kusema, I want to ignore this element of myself. But they are in a space where they can say, you know what, I can pay this guide to help me go through. Because when I sit in my silence, I don't like what I'm sitting with. Or I don't understand what I'm sitting with. So that's they're all these elements are important. To answer your question, I also just diverged there. But for those who do not take that time to look inwards, because that's the only place you'll find it. Your true self, you're not going to find it in your parents or the people around you. Those are more so the reflection of your experiences. But looking, that journey inward leads you to this awareness, this awakening.
Do both of you think kwamba a lot of time as men we are chasing the feeling of being fulfilled, and that is why there's always, we say we want to conquer one thing after another because we're in constantly chase of that feeling of fulfillment. And boy, in my mind, I'm like, there's a big difference between fulfillment and being content, because being content ni kwamba nimeridhika na nilicho nacho, I am good. Hicho ambacho Yashuke anapambana nacho, that is his life, good for him. Or do you think most of us are like one fulfillment after another, so we're always chasing the next high and stuff like that? That's
in itself an addiction. If you're chasing the high, what are you actually chasing? Because someone who is conscious and knows what they want, and when we say content, sio kwamba mie naingiza $100,000 kwa mwezi, but I'm happy. No, that's not self-awareness. Like, what do you want? Right?
And something else as well to interject is that unasema chasing and wanting to be fulfilled. But in my experience, at least up to this point, with unajua, to do the work that Nadia was affirming as well, to get to that point of revision within yourself, and then really looking at those childhood wounds and namulika everything about you that is not you and that's maybe not pleasant, and actually now having to address those things and work through them to reclaim something within yourself that you haven't reached before. Sio kazi ndogo, And a lot of people, and this is why the world is where it is, one, through their habits, through their scheduling of their day and their responsibilities, kupata huo muda. As I sit here and I communicate these things to you, there are certain factors in how I live my personal life that have allowed me to create the type of environment that makes it easy for me to do that work. You see, first of all, kwa wanaume wengi, kwa watu wengi, to even like through their 24 hours, kusema kwamba ana muda wa kujichambua, you know, it's something. So what we're and the thing you're talking about in terms of chasing.
Yeah.
One thing I've learned is for the most part, wanaume wengi wanakikimbia hicho kitu. They're running away from facing themselves.
I agree.
They're running away from facing hichi kitu tunachokiongelea hapa kwenye mzizi, because it's so far removed once it gets to a certain point where the work that needs to go in is quite significant. Lakini like anything else, ni kujua pa kuanzia na jinsi ya kuanza. And if you have guides, then it becomes much easier, because for most people hawajui hata anzie wapi. Mwingine wengi hata hawajui kwamba there is a problem. They don't even think there is a problem. They don't even think it's like, yo, what are you talking about, man? Like I'm living life. I'm doing what I'm doing. But ultimately, ukisema, if you're to really now start throwing the darts at the weak points within their internal structure, then you will start seeing
I was talking to somebody the other day, because it was on the same space, kuhusiana wanaume na mental health na nini, and we started talking about infidelity, right? And this person tuko again in the context ya wanaume na infidelity, na namna gani imekuwa normalized, na kwa namna gani hata ikitokea mwanaume amefanya kitu kama hicho na kosa limejulikana, somehow ataweza kuipin on whether their partner will, because maybe you didn't do this, or you made me feel this. It's normal. That's how people do it. And then mtu akaongea kitu kimoja ambacho has stuck with me, ambacho nilisema nitakuuliza Nadia, but now I think it fits in the same context. Akasema kwamba a lot of time linapokuja issue kama hiyo, issue kama infidelity, deep down it's somebody actually crying for help and attention. Like, inawezekana kuna matatizo mengine yapo, lakini deep down it's a cry for help and attention. It just means I'm sad to the point kwamba I cannot hold on or I cannot commit. Kwa hiyo the only way ya kupata attention ni kujaribu kumove around na kupata chochote ninachokipata huko, which I think somewhat it connects na issue ambayo tunaongelea leo, ni kwamba once you know yourself, once you've been able to connect with yourself really, then it becomes really, really easy, or not easy, but unakuwa in a better position ya kuweza kudeal na a lot of other problems ambazo ndio kama hizi tunazozungumzia.
I wouldn't say kwamba ni like I don't fully support that train of thought, that kwamba when someone is engaging in infidelity or whatever, that it's more an underlying of a specific issue, but I would put it in a sense that it is a symptom. And especially for someone who'd say, oh, you didn't do this and that's why I went and I did this. It's more of a symptom. It's again, it's a point for you to look inward and say, okay, my partner did not, look at me at a certain way, or I engaged and she pulled away. And so I went and I looked for someone else who pulled, when I engaged or I initiated, they came in. Yeah. What does that do for me? Right? What does that mean for me? Is it, am I struggling with my self-esteem? My confidence? Right? What is it? Because it's literally just a symptom. So that's one example, right? And you get someone saying, oh, I needed to just feel like a man. What does that say? My partner is refusing me, rejecting me, and so I went and I did this, and well, it proved to me that I'm still desirable. That's how I proved. But what does that say? What is it that is perhaps lacking, or is an area that you have neglected in yourself? Because that points to a deeper issue. Not that you're depressed or anything. No, that doesn't necessarily. I'm not saying that it couldn't be, but I'm saying that often it's something deeper, as we're speaking from the root. Like, do I have self-esteem, self-confidence issues, and I need external validation, because that's literally what it is. That someone rejected me, so I went to someone else who approved of me. So they validated me. So my worth was placed on someone desiring me. You know, so it all requires a lot of that internal work. And ukiziangalia easy traits and habits. Our habits are more, I like to say, symptoms. Or I like to, the analogy I tend to tell my clients, think of yourself as a tree. Yeah, and this goes well with looking at the roots, because the tree has firm roots, right? Has the branch, and then it branches off, the whatever trunk, and then it branches off, and it has the leaves. Tabia zetu hizi ndo yale majani yale. Sometimes you find a tree, the leaves are always constantly falling, they're not healthy, they're not green, they're yellowish or they're orange or whatever, right? And wengi wetu tunaangalia, jamani mti tukatekate hizi ili sionekane hivi. Tuna prune. Right? Kumbe tatizo liko kwenye mzizi kule. Mzizi unaanza kuoza kule. Au umeoza au hauko kwenye, either the environment is not conducive, au mzizi wenyewe umewekwa kwenye environment nzuri, lakini mzizi una changamoto, inabidi you know, we see what parts we need to cut off. Right? Because once you do that, then hayo majani hayo yatakuwa healthy, they'll be green, they'll be attractive. And I mean, you'll be saving a lot of your energy. Imagine pruning is a daily exercise, because you prune the rotten leaves, and then the next day, because the roots are still rotten, the leaves that come about are still diseased.
Absolutely. Afya ya mzizi.
Afya ya mzizi, exactly. And it goes exactly what you pointed out, that we need to go, you don't just look at the external, what's happening around you, because the work is deeper. That's where you start.
To add on the issue of infidelity, you know, when you look at, for most men, and this is because we're, you know, working with the nowadays you see, they tell you like, hey, women cheat too, you just don't see it.
Hey,
you just don't, they're just better at it. But
they just got better and better,
you know. But
or women are better at it, so you don't discover it.
Exactly. That's you're just better at that's at least So the thing is, infidelity in itself is a symptom. Kitu cha kwenye majani. And my thing is, there's so much we need to revise in terms of how our ideas of what relationships are.
100%.
Our idea, and this is, if you look at what's happening around the world, we're coming to this middle point where there is no running away from this.
Yeah.
You know, we have to figure out what the middle point is and what the truth space is, because it's getting to a point now where, first of all, more and more people are becoming comfortable not having long-term partners. You know, not getting into kufunga ndoa, sijui nini. Like people, because the examples that are out there of good marriages or marriages that work is becoming more and more minimal.
Somebody said that mara nyingi, a lot of people have successful marriages now, they don't speak about it. Ila watu wanaongea zaidi ni wale wenye changamoto. So as a result, you know, the same thing kwa ni mpaka Simba atakapoongea tutaendelea kumsifia mwindaji kwa sababu mwindaji anaweza kutoa stories zaidi. So that was just me saying kwa ni that is perception of watu wengi. Kwa a lot of watu ambao wana successful marriages, they don't speak about it, they're busy living their lives. Ila watu ambao wamekutana na changamoto, they are loud. So they are loud. Yani kwa hiyo story nyingi zaidi ni negative.
There are so many factors that contribute to the behavior of infidelity.
Gotcha.
Na kwa watu wengi, you know, when you commit to someone, I always say this, hata ukiwa ndani ya ndoa, there's a part of your partner that you don't know. That's the thing about being an individual at all times. There's always going to be a part of the other person that you don't know.
Yeah.
That's just the design of the human
being,
of the human being. It's what creates that individuality. Now, one thing I mentioned there is when we were looking at the topic point was the idea of the roles between the two, the male and the female.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I talk about the relationship of the self being so important is, first of all, to identify kama mwanaume, your role comes down to really one specific thing, and that is security. Now, I'm not the security I'm talking about ni kwanza wewe unajilindaje, you know? Because as we move through the world, as you develop, you meet people, all kinds of people, good, bad, you meet proposals, good, bad, you meet all kinds of situations, and the highest, the value that you need, first of all, is a security structure within your internal being. And you cannot have a solid security structure if you haven't done the work to see who you are and what you are.
100%.
Unaona. So building that security structure and knowing that I have and this is the other thing as well for the women. I know the podcast is men, but a lot of the time I feel like the women need this podcast. It's probably more.
They do listen. Trust me, they do.
Okay.
We're getting data.
Yeah,
Women,
it's
they do
coming
listen.
in. Yeah. So mi nasema mwanamke, pia tunaongea mzizi, tunaongea asili. Mwanamke kiasili. What you're really looking for is you're looking for the best guard. When you're seeking a partner, you're looking for the man who is showing the best form of security system within himself, you know. And we live in a world where people have perfected the mask.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
they've perfected the mask, and once you're in the marriage, once you're in the long-term commitment, then it's like, whoa.
Who is this?
What's that? What is this? What is that? Because as time goes on, you know, things they fall off, and before you know it, you're now committed to your cellmate. And
Oh my God. Yani, unatuambia kwanza watu are not committing and now you're telling it's prison.
No, here's the thing. Mi nasema ukweli kwa sababu most relationships are not freeing.
Yes.
They hold you prisoner.
Oh my God.
They hold you
the
prisoner.
The nature of relationship is not freedom.
It's not for you to be free. It's like, hey, you and I,
we're in this.
We're now one for everything.
We should suffer together.
You know, it's not
the
even,
joys, the pains, the.
But that's the thing. It comes down to, once again, that relationship with the self. Because once you're secure in who you are, and you meet a partner who's done the work you've done, and the two of you come into union, you're basically two guards that one are protecting themselves. Kwa sababu cha kwanza, you have to protect yourself from your partner.
Yeah.
There is a boundary in every relationship. You have to protect yourself from your partner because there's a part of you that should always be you. So and on either side, that part that has to be respected, and it has to be watered and you know and nurtured.
It has to be taken care of.
Absolutely, there has to be a part of you that your partner is fighting for you to sustain, to keep growing, in your individuality.
Wow.
The problem is there are very, very, very few couples that live that way. Everything is tethered. Everything is, you know, you're bound. You should never feel bound. There's no that freedom from within is what really creates the magic.
Yeah.
You know, I use the word illusion. There's so many behavior patterns that we've created and we accept amongst ourselves as this is great, but they're just illusions.
You spoken, umeongea kitu kimoja ambacho sitaki to skim through au to kiruki as if hakijasemwa. You spoken a little bit about the part that most of our relationships are not freeing us.
Yeah.
Right? That's what you said. Kwamba hazitufanyi tuwe huru, hazitufanyi tupae, hazitufanyi to, you know, like that kind of thing. Now, nataka niulize swali. By the way, I agree with you because that is why most of the time tunaona kwamba mtu ukiwa naye hata kama washikaji mkiwa nao wanakuwa very tofauti na akienda nyumbani kwa na partner wake unasema come on, this is not how you behave. Tuko wote you are fun, unapiga story, unacheka na nini, lakini ukienda nani a complete different person, right? And it goes both ways. It goes both ways. But do you think here in a relate now the whole concept of the roots ambayo tumezungumzia kwamba kwa most parts tumeona labda either wazazi wetu our communities kwamba watu walikuwa hivi and they got married and they changed, waka lose that part ambayo ilikuwa inawafanya wao hivi na wanabadilika vile ili kumsatisfy mtu ambaye wameishia kuwa naye. So as a result it come with a cost wewe kuacha uhuru wako. Do you think it comes with the nature ya jinsi ambavyo community na society yetu imekuwa set up?
That's definitely a big part that contributes. Like the word she used earlier is conditioning, right? And by the time people get to that place where they want to get married to somebody or commit to somebody else, they're carrying so much within themselves. You see, what will make your partner not give you that openness? Where you have the balance. There's nothing more important than balance. The entire universe exists on the principle of balance.
Yin and yang.
So there is, once you're in the dynamic of a relationship, especially one under the umbrella of marriage, that person, by the time you make that commitment, there's so many things you must have exhausted as an individual. There's just so much. And if you've done the work and you've exhausted those things, ikija muda sasa to find your partner, you will find a partner that balances that work.
100%.
So what you have with most married people or people who who end up in these unions is that you have two individuals who haven't done the work. Coming together to build something under the guise of love. See, this is the thing as well. Kama wewe hujajionyesha upendo ule wenyewe, there's a point we're going to get to where the love that you're supposedly giving me is going to be lacking. It will, because on the individual plane, you haven't fulfilled that for yourself. So how are you going to fulfill that with me in union? Mimi hapa sijaifanya kazi on an individual space to love myself and give myself fully. Wewe hapo hujaifanya hiyo kazi.
Then how the hell?
But we're coming together to build something. You see, and there are so many dynamics now that we will get into as we go along. But in terms of the roles, you know, kwa mwanaume kwa naongelea kuhusu yani being a guard na kuwa mlinzi, but ultimately msema mwanamke ndo mlinzi wa kwanza, wewe ni mlinzi wa mwisho. You know, she nowadays you have, you know, the woman, when the man walks, yani mwanaume anataka atembee akiwa mbele, the woman is
at the back.
But that's not how it should be. The woman should be at the front. Na akiwa mbele yana kulinda kwa mbele, ona mlinda kwa nyuma, you know. But the real issue before all that comes into play is the relationship you have with yourself, because then it determines what you accept, it determines who you accept, and you know how to protect yourself, and you also know. Na kwa wanaume hii ndo inakuwa ndo kitu cha muhimu sana. Unajua mwanamke kaumbwa kupokea mwongozo, but huo mwongozo anaupokea so she can multiply what you have. She can make it grow even more. Lakini she needs that man who's beside her to have, nasema inabidi kuna ramani fulani kama mwanaume inabidi uwe nayo.
I agree.
So that your woman can help grow that and multiply that. You know?
I agree. And I think even the whole concept ambao wanaume wanazungumzia submissive women and tararada, you know, women need to submit, tararada, and all this kind of thing.
Bro, ngoja, sorry to interject. we're getting to the juicy part. This is the thing as well. Kama mwanaume, if you're doing what you're supposed to do,
you don't need to ask for that. It will happen naturally.
If in the truest sense of the word, shida ni kwamba what it means to be a man, what it means kuwa mwanaume, yani kuna mambo mengi
imekuwa diluted sana, right?
Like hamna kitu, yani the idea of kitu kukitawala. That was never the original concept of the creator. Kwamba yani ukitawale kitu so you can do what you want it to do.
No, I agree.
We're talking about leadership earlier. And one of the things I tell people is the best leaders do the work so that others can learn to lead themselves. You see? Kwa hiyo wewe kama mwanaume, if you're standing in your power, if you're standing in your function and the role you have, not just to yourself, but to your community, to muongozo, in that example, you're setting that in the truest sense, you know, bila unafiki, bila, because that's the thing as well, with the human experience and the human condition is very hypocritical, you know. We demand one thing and then we do something that counters that very thing, 100%. You know. 100%. So once you stand in that center place, kwenye msingi wako, kwenye mzizi wako, where you're secure, because for example, I've been in relationships previously, and up until the point where I did the real work and got to this place where I reconnected to who I am and what I stand for and what it means kuwa mwanaume na the real work that you have to do, it changed. Like I look back at the man who was in the past relationships and I see the weaknesses, you see? I see what it is that I didn't have secure within myself that allowed certain things not to work. But equally, you also, there's the other perspective. You also look at the type of partner you attracted or you attract while you're in a certain state. Now, once you're in a committed long-term relationship, and this is the other thing as well, and Miss Nadia here, I'm sure she can affirm in her line of work, is when you have, when you're in this long-term engagement as a married couple, ule muda wa kufanya kazi wewe kama wewe unakuwa haupo.
Very limited.
It's very limited. And ultimately, unless you're conscious of that and are able to create certain spaces that allow you guys to look at yourself and do certain things individually, then you can make that progression. So just to
and I agree with you. Before Nadia comes in, it affirms or de-affirms. I don't know if that's the right word. I'm just gonna bring it back to something about uliongea kitu kimoja. And I think it's very important. Kuna a lot of conversations, especially on social media, kuhusiana na wanaume na wanawake kusubmit, right? And I think for a lot of people, wanafikiria kwamba a submissive woman ni yule ambaye ulivyosema kwamba utamtumikisha kwa namna ambavyo wewe unataka, right? Or anatakiwa awe. And I agree with you kwa sababu kuna conversation I had with my brother, tunafuatana naye. Akaambia, Michael, this is what you need to understand. This was way before I got married. Akaambia, Michael, this is something you need to understand. You play your part as a man, like you do what needs to be done, you know, as a man. forget about financial stuff. I mean, if you're blessed financially, even better. But kuna zile principles, values zako kama mwanaume ambazo unazo, na ukiziishi hizo, na mtu ambaye uta end up kuwa naye akiona hilo na aka-accept hilo na akajua kwamba hizi ndio values hizo kwa nazo, you'll never ever have complain about mtu kusubmit or not. But also, realistically speaking, women submit where they want to submit, in whichever way that, in wherever that means, wherever inamaanisha nini, you know, kwa hiyo context na wherever they submit to whoever they want to submit to. Now, as we got older and at times it may change, even concepts zime ya kusubmit inabadilika. Maybe zamani ilikuwa si you bow your head, ulikuwa unapita na nini na nini. Squeeze things are different, you know. And even context imebadilika. You have Nadia anafanya kazi asubuhi mpaka jioni, being married to, for instance, Michael anafanya kazi asubuhi mpaka jioni. You don't expect her to do the things maybe mama angu au mama wa mama angu and generation ago ambazo maybe alikuwa hana 9 to 5 kama alionayo Nadia sasa hivi kufanya the same things. So obviously hata idea maybe a submission kutoka kwa baba yangu na babu yangu is completely different from idea ya submission ya sasa hivi, right? So all you can do as a man is do what needs to be done. And this concept atuzungumzi tu financial is what are your ethics? What are your values? Ni vitu gani ambavyo unasimamia navyo? And if Nadia comes in akiona, you know what? That is the kind of thing that I want. Then you'll never have a discussion kuhusiana na mambo. Na vivyo as long as you're consistent. Kwa sababu muongea kitu kimoja, unaongea hili, then unafanya hivi. Unaongea hili, then people are like, come on, who are you? What do you where do you stay? What do you believe in?
That security is not there. I cannot trust you. There isn't, because consistency gives a sense of security that I know what to expect from Yashuke. Like najua leo Yashuke akifika nyumbani, this is what's been happening. You know, or I know at the end of every month, where we're not being, you know, the doors are not being knocked because my partner did not fulfill perhaps what they said they will fulfill, right? So that consistency, pia in a increase, it's one of the elements that helps to build that sense of security in the other person, right? And the sense of trust that the other person has within you. Yeah. So if you're inconsistent, then that shakes the foundation.
Yeah.
Na kama you know, kila mtu neno lako lina nguvu. Lakini kwa mwanaume, to your partner, there's nothing that has weight like your word, you know. And so mwanamke kiasikia ana sikio la tembo, you know. Sikio la tembo, the elephant is the symbol of motherhood, or in the natural, in the animal kingdom. And anasikiliza kiroho, yani. When you say something, it's the validation or the clearance, mwanamke yani anaisikiliza from a very deep place. So when the inconsistency that will come, say, with what you say and what you do, the promises you make, kwa sababu unajua the woman is thrives with evolution in the positive trajectory, you know, that type of growth, you know, where it's like, hey, there's just things to work with, there's continued growth, there's, you know, you don't have to have much, but the effort is there. We can look at timelines and see progressions, whether it's slow, whether it's like I can actually see the work you're doing, and I can look at promises you made 5 years ago, and maybe we haven't done 80% or 90%,
100%.
But kuna sehemu tunaenda, kuna kitu kinafanyika. I can stand beside you. I can trust what you have to say. Ukiwa, when you're not around me, I'm the most secure person in the world. And there's so many factors outside, going back to things like infidelity. Kwa hiyo, mimi nitatoa mfano pia, so for example, as kama mwanaume, you know, because our sexual behavior and our sexual patterns,
you're getting to my next question. Go on.
Our sexual behavior and our sexual patterns, you know, with time evolve na umri, mapito, kujitambua. So you'll have, one thing I've learned as well is the younger man, especially the younger man in those years through middle school, high school, we all have a sort of social print when it comes to how we engage with the opposite sex, you know? There are guys who at that age are like the hot shots, like the girls are all gearing up towards. And then there are the guys who don't get as much attention. Then you have the middle guys who, you know, but each and every one of those men, young men, as they keep going through life and get to these more and more secure or the type of relationships like marriage and things like that, that history really comes into play. Kwa hiyo kwa mfano, wewe ulivyokuwa sekondari, girls never really gave you much attention. You were more of the nerdy type, you know. You weren't on the sports team. But you were smart. But nobody really gave you much attention, you know, in that way. But you've made it. You've grown in confidence. You made it out of uni. You know, your features are coming in now. The attention is growing a little bit. You move on. You get a nice job. You get it now. You find a nice girl. You're like, hey, huyu namuona ndo akumpeka nyumbani kwa mama. You do the traditional process, kanisani, msikitini, whichever one you adhere to, and then you're now married, mtoto wa kwanza, mtoto wa pili. Lakini in your career, account huku inazidi kukua. Ulianza hauna hata kadi ya benki, sasa hivi CRDB unaingia private, yani
account ya private bank.
Sasa, and now you're in that car, you have the money, but within yourself, and this is what we're talking about revision, there are things you never really went back to, certain insecurities that came at a certain age, and certain sexual expressions that you had, but now you have these resources, and you have time, and you get to travel away from the misses, and all of a sudden, kuna vishawishi sasa vinakuja. And they tag onto those areas of lacking, those insecure space within yourself, and before you know it, you've umeonja hapa. Okay, next trip umeonja hapa, next trip umeonja pale, and then it becomes something you feel you have in control of, but really there's something at play on a much deeper level that brings you to that space. So a lot of the men, when men are in that space where you'd say are not being faithful to their partners, there are so many factors that lead up to that. The other one as well, which is very, very critical, minasema, a lot of kuna, and this is on doing the self-work, a wounded woman or a woman who is not taking the time to also address her wounds becomes very dangerous in a marriage.
I agree.
You see, it becomes very dangerous because the wounds usually are much deeper. They're less outwardly spoken, and mtu unaingia kwa mfano kwenye mahusiano na unaingia kwenye mahusiano na mwanamke ambaye she was previously married or she didn't get married, lakini alikuwa na mtoto na mtu, and you've met, there's something you like about this woman, and you choose to commit and start a life with her. Sasa the trauma history, to use a more scientific term, that the trauma history ya huyo mtu, you don't really know it, because the language that we usually have in the way we communicate our emotions with each other, it never gets to the root of unplugging those things within the other person. Kwa unajikuta umeingia kwenye mahusiano, umeingia kwenye ndoa with a woman who within her trauma history ana vidonda kutoka kwa baba, ana maybe a sexual abuse story ambayo hamna mtu anaijua. Hapo ana mtoto with a partner who things didn't work out with, so there's already a high sense of betrayal or you know, kwa hiyo wewe unaingia in a situation where you're taking on something where that type of work, and I hope Miss Nadia here can affirm, is that type of work requires the individual to really take time to themselves and work through those things. However, that's just not what's happening, you know. And I've seen this even in my own family, where you nagundua kabisa, like, hey, these say in my family, I usually don't mind speaking on my own personal experiences, but kwenye familia yangu, my parents used to be the exemplary couple, you know, the exemplary couple to a lot of people when they were growing up. And now they're in their retirement years, in their retirement age, and they live in separation, you know, haven't seen each other in years, and it's not been the, you know, best experience for the family, but even more so for them individually. Nikiangalia what they did for the commitment and the work, and you know, you get to this stage in your later years, and the person you've worked really hard with, and now you're at this place where you don't see eye to eye, and but as a child looking on the from the outside looking in, the biggest part of their problem comes from this individual work that was never done a long time ago. And can have 30-40 years of marriage, and something comes along, or something is bruised and grows and grows, and before you know it, it cannot be, you have to address it. And when you choose unakuwa mlipuko, because it's not being done in an organic way. So this idea is very, very important of the work we each have to do individually. Na kabla kama mwanaume, kabla you've made the commitment to a woman, is you have to have a security system within yourself. Kwa mwanaume, na pia mwanamke anabidi awe na security system within herself that allows her to filter these flags, so to speak, that can then allow you to make the right choices and protect each other in the long term.
100%. And actually, umeongea mfano mzuri sana. If you go back, I think one day I was having a talk with my good brother Togolani way back before haja mheshimiwa balozi. As we were talking, I don't know tulikuwa tunaongelea nini, lakini akusema akaanza Michael, look, you go back to high school, right? Back in the days ukiwa shule na vitu kama hivyo, for you to be able to pull in girls, you don't have to be the brightest. I mean, wapo ambao walikuwa because they are smart, wengine because they want sports team, wengine wanaweza kuongea Kiingereza kizuri, wengine because they could sing, they could rap, you know, not necessarily like kulikuwa kuna a lot of other things, but point is you had to stand out, you know. And as you grow older, kuna watu ambao they wanachukulia ile literally, because there's a phase to these things. And then I think it comes with doing work. Kuna muda ukishapiga like, come on, that was just it. Tuachana hayo mambo yaendelee. Lakini kuna wengine watu mfano mzuri sana kwamba yani wamekuwa na ile kitu, maybe wamekuwa na ile rejection, and then baadaye they get all the resources. So they're like, we need to go back and revisit some of these experiences. In this way, you have a lot of grown-ass men out here wanapambana na watoto chuo kikuu, watoto na familia zao. Because then it is easy kuna kupambana na watoto wa vyuo. Wenyewe wanaona they have the resources now, so they can either manipulate to do whatever it is that needs to be done. But really, it stems from that. Kwamba ni kuna mwingine maybe alivyokuwa chuo, he was very committed, and somebody with great financial resources akaja akamchukulia the girlfriend, so now amekuwa kwenye position like, I gotta go back and relieve that trauma. It's a fact, it's there, and then because we don't want to do the work, I'll try kufika kwenye the root cause of the problem to now. Point number 2 ambao umezungumza before I let Nadia in, umeongea the part of not doing the work, kwa tunakuwa na resentment kwenye relationship. And you're right, this is why we've seen a lot of people wamesurvive kwenye ndoa miaka 30, and then that saying kwamba the straw that broke the camel's back. Kitu kinatokea unamsema but wewe mmeachana, ukizungumza ile content au context iliyotokea pale, you're like, but this is not it. Hii ni kitu ambacho mngeweza kuzungumza, lakini deep down ukizungumza unaona mtu amekuwa na resentment for the longest time. And I think it comes down, and I could be wrong, lakini it comes down from moja, mtu kutokuruhusiwa kuishi maisha yake wakati mko wote respectfully, kwamba these are the things that I like, this is me. Then how do we accommodate ambacho zungumza mwanzo, how do we accommodate my individuality, and how do we accommodate your individuality, in the sense that ili tuweze kutusaidia sisi zote kukua, kwa sababu then itatusaidia uko mbele when shit get worse. Hiyo moja. And pili, communication. We don't have the tools za kuweza communicate vizuri na respectfully, na mimi weza kuweza kusema, I hear you, I get you. Mostly communications ikianza inakuwa me versus you instead of me and you versus this thing. So it's a lot of work.
And yote ina stem for, again, that lack of awareness about our own what we're bringing into the relationship. Kwa sababu kweli a commitment is what? Yani, it's not freedom. When you're not uncommitted, then you have some sense of you are responsible for yourself and only yourself and the things that you're doing, right? But ukiingia in a relationship, one, you're in one way or the other saying that I'm committing myself to you and you are committing yourself to me. And so in that sense, we are letting go of some sense of freedom, right? Because now you're not responsible only for yourself. You're also responsible for someone else. You're responsible for the family. But also that other person is also not just responsible for themselves anymore, but they're responsible for you and your well-being as well and the family. So in that sense, you're both relinquishing this sense of aloneness in that process. But a healthy relationship, you will still have that sense of, you will not feel like you're being stifled. I think one of the ways people can gauge kwamba huyu mtu ambaye niko naye ndiye mtu ambaye ninahitaji kuwa naye, right, na anayenifaa, ni you are still able to thrive despite relinquishing that I would say immature sense of freedom. Right? Because what you're developing there is it's a more holistic sense of freedom that is a collective freedom, that we are in this together. I am acquiring an additional resource, and in this togetherness, we're still able to be ourselves, and the person you're with needs to be able to, if you cannot be yourself with them, then they are not the right person for you. Yeah. Like, you need to really think of that. Lakini cha pili, wengi wetu ambaye hatujafanya the internal work, huyo mtu ambaye tunamuattract ni mtu ambaye ana trigger, as you're saying, ana poke at those elements that are in the dark for you. So rather than running away, because then that's kind of what you've been doing. If someone is poking at your insecurity, that means you've been living your life running away from these blind spots, right? And now you're meeting someone who's also trying to force you to look at the blind spots, and you're also running away. Yeah? But once you're in that type of relationship, and this person is now triggering elements of you, rather than coming into a conclusion that this is not the person for me, hafai, go towards it. Kwamba kwa nini in this relationship, mimi kuna hiki kitu la hasira is constantly being woken up, but I've been in other relationships now, this is not something that came out for me, right? Perhaps that's an area that we are needing to explore. When we look at attachment, because early childhood, those roots a lot of how we relate to the world and the people around us is how we related to our closest, our primary caregiver. Oftentimes ni mama yetu, because mama ndo ana meet our basic needs, is with us a lot of the time in those formative years. 0 to 3, most of the time is spent with moms. Especially those first, like I think that first year of life ambayo bado mpaka watoto wana miaka hadi 3 bado wananyonya. Right?
Yeah. Unaniuliza
na nakwambia. I know some are weaned off mapema lakini often it goes towards to that age.
Yeah.
But the relationship with that primary caregiver, were my needs met before I learned the language skill? You know, because how does the child communicate themselves? Through tears, through crying, through their expressions, right? Their immature expressions. But how are those met? That's where the attachments are now being formed. Na wengi wetu unakuta either there was an insecure attachment, an ambivalent attachment, a disorganized form of attachment, kwamba siku hii mamangu nikilia ananipa ziwa, ngenge anipi, you know, maybe I was put early in my own room there and I just had to cry by myself paka when my mom decides to come through. Whatever it was, our sense of attachment starts from there. Yeah? And also that's how we then relate to others. Yeah. Sasa ukifika into adulthood, muda mwingi, if let's say I have an anxious attachment, you find that you attract people, yeah, who have an avoidant attachment style. Kwa sababu huyu, there's an anxiety in them, but they avoid the tension by running. They withdraw. Wewe, you're looking for someone, yeah, to validate that, you know, your anxieties, your fears, whatever are valid and you are valid. But because that inner work cannot be done by someone else, you attract the person that, like, chokonoa, that part of you. That actually wakes up your anxious self so that you can do the work. Yeah? So, as we were saying, a lot of these overt things, if we take the stance of hizi ni ishara to their symptoms, their data. My emotions are data. So emotions in and of themselves really mean nothing. Right? They don't hold specific string of meaning. We give them meaning. Right? If right now I feel scared, ninaweza nikaanza kuscan my environment and say, okay, so why am I scared? Right? Oftentimes there's error in our interpretations. Right? So the people you attract, the behaviors that you find yourself engaging in, zote ni information that you need to look at. So it would be perfect if all of us started from the space of working on ourselves, if we're talking about relationships. Ila mda mwingine unaweza ukajikuta, because again, fikiria, if I'm an anxious attachment style and I attract an avoidant, right? And they're triggering now my style, my attachment style, and I'm triggering theirs, then if we're thinking of a puzzle, we are the puzzle. Like we're fitting, right? Nice, beautifully with one another.
Yeah, like it makes sense, right?
Because what? Yeah. Because we're forcing each other to go inward and work on ourselves. Yeah? So if let's say I'm coming from a secure attachment base, then I will most likely attract a secure attached person. Because they've done the work, I've done the work. We're now complete with ourselves, within ourselves, of ourselves. And so I can actually come and actually be that team. So we can relinquish that individual freedom and come and create a unified sense of freedom. So now we're moving as a team. Now we are a car, right? I'm on the left, you're on the right, and we are moving. Imagine gari liko na tairi moja.
Yeah, it's impossible. Yeah.
Right? Sindio? So, ukiangalia mtu anayekutrigger, that means one, yeye pia bado hajafanya that work. That is an indication kwamba na yeye pia hasn't worked on herself. Na mimi, I have not worked on myself. Because if I had worked on myself, I would not have attracted someone who hasn't yet worked on themselves.
Wow.
And just to
deep realization, Nadia, for a lot of people right now. Yeah.
Just to add on to what Nadia just shared, when I was at the start of the journey of doing the work for myself, one of the things that was very, very important was understanding your childhood wounds and the attachment style that the pattern within yourself. And if anyone's listening to this, you have to take the time to go and just study attachment styles. And it will be the beginning of you getting a bit more insight of what's been going on. The spectrum is anxious, avoidant, and then you have the secure space in the middle, right? And I think the combination sometimes where it's anxious, avoidant, but to know, and watu wengi wakiangalia mahusiano yao, wakiangalia ndoa, you will be able to see who's the anxious one and who's the avoidant one. And usually the anxious one will do things that wants the attention and that energy, and there's a sense of lack that comes in that way. And the avoidant one is more of the suppressor, and uses the suppression as a power position in many ways as well. Because if it's almost like if I have it's like a lock on the emotional aspect, and then the other person is like on the other side of the emotional aspect. So it becomes this play on energy as well, So attachment styles and to know, am I anxious or am I avoidant? And once you know which side of the spectrum you lean on more, then you can start doing the work to get to the secure space in the middle.
100%. So Yashuke, it's been a very long conversation, but totally worth it. As we're winding down, I have two things I want to ask. One, in the process of you doing how did you do the work? Like, what did it take, and what did it involve for you to actually did it involve therapy? Did it involve a lot of meditation? Like, what was that process for you? That would be number one. And number two would be, kama mtu amesikiliza yote haya. Now you want them to live with one thing. What would that be?
Okay. So I'll start with the first one in terms of how I engaged with the process. So cha kwanza, hiyo kazi haina mwisho.
It's a never-ending process.
It's a never-ending process. However, what changes is what that process bears in terms of its fruit or the lack of fruit, right? So there's a middle point that once you access and you go to the other side, then you start getting back a lot more positive. It's growth once you remove certain barriers within yourself, then there's so many things that are amplified in the positive in a positive way. So first of all, for me, it was, you have to look within, and usually something will come along that pushes you to that point. For a lot of us, we need things to push us over the edge, where it's like, okay, I gotta face this, or I gotta make a change. But the first, usually it starts very simple. It starts with something small. So for me, one, it was slowly as I grew older, I started to notice certain patterns within myself that I couldn't let go of, that were not really feeding my spirit in a positive way. So then it becomes, okay, what are these things? Where did they start? Why are they this way? So for example, maybe I was somebody who could get easily triggered if somebody communicated something to me that I didn't agree with, but why should just an opinion, an off-mark comment that somebody makes, why should it trigger you in a, something within you shifts, and you're like, like why? What? That means there's something within you that needs to be addressed and figure out where that insecurity comes from. So there's the little things like that, and then mi nasema kwamba then the treatment process goes into other things. So, for example, naishi your day-to-day life, do you make time for yourself? Do you do like physical exercise? What's your diet like? You know, the music you listen to, the food you eat, the circle you keep. So there's that part of the work as well in terms of what you're putting within your, because kila kitu unajaribu kubadilisha mazingira ya ndani. Kwa hiyo chochote kinachoingia ndani na chenyewe inabidi ukiangalie, because these are the things that are used to, you know, either seal certain habits, or inamulika kwamba I say this is something you should address, or this is a pattern, and you find it mirrors certain things that you consume and you bring into your system. So a big part is your day-to-day life, how you live it. If vingine vyote, they can be happening, and mind matters, where Miss Nadia anapofanya kazi. It's I always say there are two minds. There's the brain mind, your brain mind, and then there's the heart mind, yani sehemu ya roho. And so many times previously I've wanted to make certain changes in my life, but I could never just quite get there to a point where I could say I've actually done something and been consistent, and to a point where you go around people that feel like, you know, quote unquote, they've known you, and you're a totally different person from what the idea of who you were. And I always find it funny because mi mwenyewe, the version of myself that I was projecting was not me. Kwa hiyo hata mimi nilikuwa sijijui. So you should not be surprised that you don't recognize the person in front of you. You see, because we have these caricatures that we've created and we present to each other, but it's not the authentic self. So when you take the time to remove all the things that are within you that are not true to who you are, and then you present yourself to a common group of peer friends, and usually you'll find you have to change your circle. You know, you'll find you need what they call it a soul tribe, or you find you meet people who maybe that's why I'm at this place now in my life where I get to meet you guys, right?
100%.
Yeah, because I'm telling you, I didn't have the type of circle previously where we could have this type of open discussions and express things in this way, because there is a certain journey that the two of you have been on individually and continue to be on that allows these types of dialogues to happen. So that's in terms of doing the work, look within yourself, find, very important, what your attachment style is at this point in time. Am I avoidant? Am I anxious? Look at the ways you can get to a secure place and create an environment that allows you to do that work. You see, because when your mind, and this is any decision that I've made that's actually had substance long term, it's come from the heart mind, because that's where the real power is. Your brain can convince you of many things, but it's ultimately a weak spot.
It's quite polluted.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah,
It's not.
So kikipita rohoni, yani huo ndo ushindi. It's very difficult for that to be reversed, but this can just change. Your brain changes all the time with what's coming from the outside. And one word or a summary of that is do the work.
Do the work.
Do the work. That's
In my office, I have
I was going to say the same thing.
that says doing the work is
the shortcut.
So you can't really. The shortcut is what most of us are doing. We're trying to avoid and run away. We think that, okay, if I run away, that's how I'm going to get to where I need to go. But actually, it's going straight into doing that work, that internal work.
Sticking
That's
to
the
the
actual
process.
shortcut. Because then you're not brewing any more disruptive issues around you, but you're actually conquering yourself.
In a nutshell, Nadia anachosema, stop reading one quote on Instagram and Twitter. That would inspire you to go like, I've done the work. Just because there's one quote, amazing quote to me, you're like, yes. He quoting and speaking and mimi kwa hiyo. You know, Nadia, for you, in the last round, anything you want to leave us with?
And sorry,
Go on,
before Nadia closes, and something else is, do the work, very important, but what you're looking for is to create a secure structure within yourself at any point. And if there are young men, young women, older men, older women who are listening to this, whether you're in a committed relationship long term or currently dating somebody for a short period of time, really examine how secure you are as an individual at this point in time. Really try and address parts of yourself that you haven't addressed for a long time, and become your own critic in the highest sense.
And be true about it.
Absolutely.
And be true about it.
Absolutely, because you know, when you do that for yourself, then you don't even create the type of environment where the other person now comes in to now be the critic, because you're your own critic. You're the person who's really looking at yourself and looking at what you need to do and work through. Yeah.
Definitely.
You want to leave us with anything?
Well, one thing I would say taking away, and I think always, is do the inner work and prioritize it, because there will never be, you know, like you're listening to this podcast for a reason. Like the more I study from the science perspective, the more I'm seeing also from the religious perspective, the spiritual perspective, and all the perspectives, because as humans, we are a culmination of all these aspects. And the one thing that is going to always give you unfiltered, honest feedback, right? You call it the heart mind. Yeah. For me, that's basically, like, if I think of just the psychological aspect of it, is your emotional brain. That's the one that is purely you. You know, that thing, that your alarm clock that tells you whatever is happening around you is not in line with who you actually are. It's the emotional brain. That reptilian brain that was formed before it's the oldest part of you. From conception, as you're in your mother's tummy, as your little parts are now forming, that part was also formed. That started to form from the very onset of you. That is you. So now you're in a relationship and you're feeling anxious. You're feeling insecure. You're feeling angry. That is your true self telling you whatever the hell's happening around you is not you. Is not the actual you. Is not what the actual you believes they deserve, believes they want. Often, a lot of us, we do not listen to that emotional or that heart brain. We try to find ways to quiet it because we justify it. But she's very beautiful, she's coming from a really great family, or I can fix her, or I can fix him, or he's really well off, or he's very handsome. But then your actual true self is communicating something with you. You're in a workspace and you're having these emotions popping up. You're interacting with people and there are certain emotions that are popped up. A lot of us don't listen. Why do people end up drinking? There's data, the emotion, the them is communicating, and they're like, oh, I need to numb this place down. Yeah, and then our brain, our logical brain, sometimes not very logical, because it's polluted. It's polluted by the experiences we've had, our parents, their interactions, and etc. And so a lot of the context, how we make sense of the emotion, of the us, often is misconstrued. So returning back to your source, using your emotional, your heart brain as your compass, your guide to guide you towards yourself, not towards something outside of you, but to guide you towards yourself, And ndio maana mwanzo nikasema, when you're in a relationship with someone and you've worked on yourself and they've worked on themselves, you should never feel like you're stifled or that you are chained. Because
it's not slavery.
That's not how you're meant to feel. Right? In that moment, when you've actually done that work and you know who yourself and you know what you want, the true self, the true you, that means you're making the right decisions, you're taking the right steps, you're engaging in the right behaviors, you're surrounding yourself with the right people in the right environments. And when you're doing everything according to who you actually are, then your environment is supposed to be working for you. The people around you should be working for you. And vis-a-vis for them, if they've done the work, then their environment is working for them. So she's working for you and you are working for her. For who she is, the real self, their true self.
Yeah.
And that is the most freeing part. Because a lot of us go about with our freedom, unchained to a marriage, a relationship, a person, but we're actually just a slave of us running away from who we are. So we think we're free, but we're actually running away from doing the work. And so you're still a slave. You're a slave to your avoidance of yourself.
Wow.
So rather, free yourself by doing that work.
Yeah.
Because I think that's where you get the ultimate freedom. That's where you become content with who you are, with the people you're with things that you're doing, because you know, I've done the work. I know that these decisions are very conscious. I'm doing this for me. Michael can look and say, but Nadia, why are you living this hippie lifestyle in a commune? And it's okay. Michael can have a different perspective in what he wants for him. Right? And in that point, because I've done the work and I know the decisions I'm making are for me, your comments are not going to bother me. I'll be like, well,
I respect you. I hear you.
I respect you.
I hear you.
That's how you'd like to live, and this is how I like to live, and we live in harmony.
Yeah, so that is Nadia Ahmed at MindMastersTZ on Twitter, at MindMastersTZ on Instagram. There's the link kwenye bio yake, direct itakupeleka kwenye website, and then you can book your appointment with her. She's our own resident psychologist, and I always say that she's good at what she does, probably the best. Mtafute, utazungumza naye, not for free. She's gonna charge, but very affordable. Please, 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 please. You know, you gotta be able to talk to somebody. If you cannot talk to me, you cannot talk to Yashuke, then speak to professionals. They are here to help. She says herself, kwamba anatoa guideline, anatupa guide ya kwamba
not guideline,
guide.
I walk with you, so I journey with you. Because the biggest thing ni kwamba, as I think our whole conversation, what the thing, if you can take out of it, is you are the expert in your life, and no one can come and say, Yashuke, this is who you are. Yashuke is the only one who has the power to say, this is who I am. Right? And so all I do is sit with you. If we're in a car, I'm in your passenger seat, and I'm like, oh, do you see that elephant? But it's your job to say, okay, this elephant is this distance away from me. I'm driving right towards it. I need to swerve this way. I don't do anything. You decide, do I accelerate? Do I brake? Do I change gears? I'm just sitting there. I'm like, oh, you're driving towards this direction. Do you see that butterfly?
Yeah, she gets paid for it.
Do you see this?
She says she's not doing it, but she gets paid for it. Amazing.
Yeah, because it takes a lot of...
It does.
It takes a lot of, what's the word? What makes it different, what makes it a service is that not everyone can sit. People are not able to sit with us and dedicate their time to seeing the road we're driving and sit in our car as we drive towards our road.
I agree.
Because we're all busy trying to drive our own directions.
100%.
So that's the only part that's why you pay me. Because now I'm taking a step away from my car and I enter your car and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a passenger here, which when you have to, it takes away the security because I don't have the control.
Yeah.
And now you're driving the car. You can decide to drive into that elephant that I tell you, do you see the elephant?
Yeah.
And then now you crash the car and now I'm dead too. Right? So your normal relationships, they most certainly wouldn't do that. They will do it to an extent, but when they see you're driving towards a wall, watakwambia, man, you're on your own. I'm getting out of this car.
Yeah.
Right? But when it comes to doing the work with a therapist, for example, then they also have the tools to help you see, like, okay, you're accelerating towards this wall. Like, what the hell is going on? And they can poke you and ask you the right questions to help you to realize that, oh, I'm very scared, and so my leg is pressed down onto this naniliu accelerator. I didn't even realize it. I was just being scared that I'm also gonna crash. Lakini let's say your intimate partner hatoelewa, hana ile ule uelewa wa kuona, kuobserve mwili mzima. Yaani unaendesha tu kwenye ukuta, but haoni kwamba huyu mtu amekanyaga ile accelerator and they're pushing back in their seat and they look like they want to jump out of their body.
Yeah.
But they can't.
Got you.
That's the only difference.
It's a huge difference. Don't say the only. It's a huge difference. Yashuke.
Yes, bro.
If a person want to reach out to Kwako, whether for conversation or for the thing you do, you talk about nurturing creatives.
Yeah.
You've talked about mentoring, which is very important. One of the things about vijana wengi to relax sasa hivi ni mentorship. So, how do people reach out to you?
They can reach me on my Instagram, which will now have a post,
Good.
a picture of us.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, so Yashuke Masura, I think you put it up on your page.
Yes.
Or a link somewhere.
Yeah.
And my email as well, yskshowcase@gmail.com.
YSK
Yeah, YSK
Showcase. One word. YSK Showcase @gmail.com. Yeah.
At the moment, really, if speaking opportunities, I love having dialogue with people, sharing the knowledge that I've been able to accumulate over the years. So, anyone should feel free to reach out on what we've talked about today. If someone needs me to expand or do personal consultation for anything, they can reach me on those outlets.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surely we're gonna bring you back because there are a lot of other things that you haven't touched that I think like woof, ingetuchukua siku mbili au tatu, but definitely we're gonna come back na touch on other topics as well. But most importantly, thank you for coming through.
Thank you for having
I always say kwamba conversation had is a life saved. So there are a lot of things about tumeongea leo, lakini I believe kuna vitu mtu ambaye kwa sababu mwenyewe I've had a lot of aha moments as we were speaking. So I believe kwamba watu wengine pata sikiliza pia kuna vitu ambavyo watapiki utakafanya mtu reflect na kuona maybe it could be a turning point, right? There's always one. We talk about a straw that broke a camel's back. Like a straw ni ule mrija tu mdogo yani ambao ulivunja mgongo wa ngamia, na kufanya mambo yabadilike. So it could be one thing, kitu ambacho tumekiongea leo ambacho kitaenda kubadilisha maisha yako. So between me, Nadia and Yashuke, we hope ambao umesikiliza kwamba there are vitu ambavyo unaweza ukavipiga. And let us know how you feel about this conversation at @MenThePodcast on Twitter, @MenThePodcast on Instagram, @MenThePodcast on Facebook. I always say send us a DM kama kuna kitu ambacho unataka we expand on. Hell, kama kuna kitu ambacho pia ukabaliani nacho ambacho tumezungumza, please feel free. This is just a conversation starter, we say, So it's free for you kuto agree na yale ambayo tumezungumzia hapa. The whole essence of the conversation, right? So, let us know, and kama you're totally against what tumeongea pia, feel free. We'll let you in the podcast now, we'll hear you out as well. It's the whole essence, Kwa na conversation. So @MenThePodcast on Twitter, @MenThePodcast on Instagram. You can stream na unaweza kutusikiliza popote from Spotify, Boomplay, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Audiomack, Podvine, Good Pods, God knows na a lot of other spots ambazo unatumia kusikiliza podcast yako. Till next time, we appreciate you. Umeweza kaa kwa masaa mawili unatusikiliza. I'm not gonna cut anything out. I'm going to put it as it is. So if you've made it to this part of the podcast, then you're a true champion. We appreciate you. Till next episode, thank you, and we are out.
Men, the podcast.